Morning, everybody. Ethan, can you hear me in the back? Well, welcome. I want to welcome everyone here to America First Policy Institute's headquarters. I know many of you were part of the Rededicate 250 event yesterday. What an incredible job President Trump and his team did. Vince Haley, just spectacular. You know, it is true, and for those of you that were with us yesterday, we did a tour of our new building. And it's so special that engraved in Latin above the front door are the words, the translation, only with God. And so that building, built in 1903, that will be the future hub for the America First movement for decades and generations to come. Inscribed in 1903, what is true then? It was true in 1776. It was true when George Washington took a knee at Valley Forge. And it is the only path for the future of this country to make it to the next 250. And I just want to thank everybody here and congratulate you for being a part of that yesterday. I understand that the suntan lotion business did pretty well here in Washington yesterday, but it was super special. Speaking of special, we have a very special speaker here today to join us. He is the author of Trump 2.0. The revolution that will permanently transform America. That's a pretty interesting title and subtitle, isn't it? I have to preface it by saying that I am personally a recovering Bush-Cheney Republican. It's a long rehabilitation process, but I've learned a lot since I first came to town here 26 years ago and just basically subscribed to the red team, blue team narrative that really isn't accurate. I was blessed to come from a very working class area, and I actually grew up 2 towns away from the great Kellyanne Conway. And I think there were very few Republican political professionals, particularly in the advent of the 2012 loss by Willard Mitt Romney, who really understood what time it is. If you remember back to 2012 and the autopsy that the RNC wrote and published with some great effect. It was basically the path to victory in 2016 and beyond would be a total capitulation on core conservative issues, including mass legalization of maybe tens of millions illegal aliens who came into our country and broke our laws in doing so. And there was a gentleman who's the 45th and now 47th president. And maybe it's because of his background, particularly being in touch with working people at all of his work sites, who thought differently of it. And our speaker today is one of the very few campaign professionals who is able to understand that actually the old formula is stale. The old formula saw us in 2012 or in 2008. We even lost states like Indiana, for goodness sake, North Carolina. And so we are heavily indebted to this individual who's about to speak to you all for helping then Mr. Trump and then President-elect and President Trump, along with Kellyanne, really kind of redo the chessboard. And in so doing in 2016, for the first time since 1984, America First conservative policies won the Rust Belt, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And what's happened is, through policy and through a rejection of political correctness in the political elite, we are changing the way that policies and coalitions and campaigns are won. It's a really healthy thing. We've traded in a coalition that was largely comprised of middle-aged, slightly overweight, graying white dudes for a working class party that's vivacious, that's bringing in new blood, that got record amounts of support in 2024 from young people, from Hispanics, from people of color, and so that will continue. But at the heart of all of it is policy. Our founding chair, Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, has a great quote, and like everything else she says, has the added benefit of being true. What Linda says is, you get the policies right, and then the politics follow. It's not about marketing. Ground game matters a lot, but you got to get the policies right. And so this individual, who I'm about to introduce here, is the author of this book, was at the heart of all of that. Getting the policies right, figuring out how you can market those policies, and in so doing, build a new, vibrant coalition that I believe long-term has great effect and great possibility to govern for years and, God willing, decades to come. Sean Spicer started his political career long before he served as the 30th White House press secretary and made his mark as one of the most recognized staffers in the Trump administration. He is the host of the Sean Spicer Show and co-host of The Huddle. Particularly even for those of us who live and work and breathe here every day, The Huddle is where to go. If you really want to know what's happening when the lights go off and all the committee hearings, The Huddle is the best encapsulation of what's the true reality in D.C. and who's doing what, and Sean does it better than anybody. He is the president of Rigwell LLC, a strategic consulting firm that provides insights and public affairs strategies to C-suite corporate and association executives. He is the author of 4 previous books, including The Briefing, Leading America, Radical Nation, and the best-selling children's book, The Parrots Go Bananas. A Rhode Island native, and I think there's something to that. Rhode Island is a very working-class state, so Sean was able to understand the sensibilities of the voters we would need to capture in order to not only gain the opportunity to govern, but to do it successfully. He serves as a captain in the U.S. Navy Reserve. President Trump also appointed Sean as a member of the Board of Visitors to the United States Naval Academy, a husband and a dad of 2. He resides in Virginia. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome up to the stage Mr. Sean Spicer. Well, welcome, Sean. This is awesome, man. I hope I didn't lay it on too heavy, but I believe everything I said was totally accurate.
I'll take it.
You are the man. I think about you and Kellyanne and just a few others who saw, man, we got to do something different. Can you give us a depiction of that as well as the general thesis of this book? And then I want to go a little bit further on a couple of these points.
Yeah, first of all, thank you guys, and thank everyone here at AFPI for what you guys do. Let me start just tweaking one piece of what you said, and then I want to take this. I think what a lot of us recognize is that Donald Trump was the guy that could make, I mean, all we did was amplify what he was doing. He was the one that led that, and that was very different. Most politicians look to their consultants to tell them what to do and how to do it. And one of the things that was very unique about Donald Trump is that he was like, this is where I'm going, this is how I'm doing it. I'd love your help in amplifying this. And that's just a very different dynamic in politics, because normally we're the ones who sit in the meeting and say, you know, sir, this is the issue that we got to hammer on. This is how you should say it. This is the way you should say it. And they'll go, okay, good, I got it. Trump is the opposite. He tells you what he's going to say, and then you go, oh, okay, good. I learned that the hard way a couple times.
But you got through it.
Yeah. Most of the bruises are soft, and you can't see them anymore. But the essence of Trump 2.0 is the following. Donald Trump is only the second president in U.S. history and the first in modern history to serve 2 terms that weren't sequential. So you and I both served Bush Cheney. If you're the second term, Monday becomes Tuesday, becomes Wednesday, the same Secretary of State, the same Secretary of Treasury, the same Chief of Staff keep doing their jobs. You go down the Capitol, you raise your hand, you swear to affirm and defend the Constitution for 4 more years, and life goes on. You keep working on whatever was on your desk, you continue working on. And so the essence of Trump 2.0 is to understand what happened in those 4 years. And AFPI in particular played a central role in that. And I literally start off the book by talking about it. But if you don't get what happened in those intervening 4 years, then you will never understand Trump 2.0. This is not simply the extension of the first term. And I had this conversation with the president the other day about it's not in any way to minimize or diminish what happened in Trump 1.0. It was very historic, very consequential. But because of the planning and the plotting, particularly, you know, and again, I don't say this because I'm here, it's in the book, I can't take it back, of AFPI. And again, I don't think that what I wanted to do is to make sure that everybody understood that. Because as I say, it didn't just happen. And when you compare and contrast, I'll give you 2 quick examples. the people and the policies, right? So day one in Trump 1.0, we were literally walking around being like, hi, I'm Sean, I'm the press secretary. And be like, hi, I'm Scott Pruitt, I'm the EPA administrator. Good to meet you, Scott. Like, tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, we were getting to know each other. What's the agenda? Well, you know, I don't really know yet. We led, if you remember, in 2016, the first legislative priority that Donald Trump led with was healthcare. Now, I don't care who you are. Do you remember Donald Trump ever saying health or care during the 2015 cycle? No. That was the agenda that was told to him by the Hill. They were like, oh, you need to do this right off the bat. And so we were like, oh, okay. In Trump 2.0, Tom Homan hadn't even gotten his ID. And he was like, we're going to Boston, we're going to this, we're going here, we're doing mass deportation. They didn't know where to go, how to do it, who to bring along with them. And that was because of the planning and the plotting that was done largely in this organization. When we kicked off Trump 1.0, there was a horde of people that came up to Bedminster or to Trump Tower to meet with the president and to say, hey, I'd be interested in serving in the administration. One of them was General James Mattis. Someone had said, hey, he'd be a great Secretary of Defense. And so he comes up, he meets with Trump at Bedminster, and then December 5th, we get on a plane, we go to Charlotte, North Carolina. The president rolls him out and says, here's the next Secretary of Defense, General James Bad Dog Mattis. They had known each other for 1 hour. Rex Tillerson, 1 hour. Think about the people that occupy so many of those senior places now, right? My successor, Caroline Leavitt, has been with the president. She served in Trump 1.0. She served on the campaign. She's with them now. Stephen Chung, the comms director, been on the 2015 campaign, worked all 4 years of the 2016 administration. Marco has known him since they debated each other back in that first cycle. Pete Hegseth has known him 25 years. Susie Wiles been with him 11. I mean, there's just a difference. And so one of the things that I talk about, Martin, in the book is, you and I were talking about this just a few minutes ago. When AFPI stood up, they called and they said, can we sit down with you? We want to talk to you about, like, what was it like on day one? What resources would you have liked to have had? What should you have been doing? How would you have set up your offices? And you talked to countless other people. And then when Caroline came in, they were like, here. The only person I got to talk to was Josh Earnest from Obama's camp. I mean, like, nice guy, very helpful, but, like, it wasn't like he was like, look, here's what I think about the America First agenda. Here's how you should set up. When I met with Josh the first time, he said, hey, I may have to cut this short or ask you to wait because I have a schedule to meet with the President Obama at 2 o'clock. That was my time. That was his time. My first day with Trump, by 2 o'clock, I think I'd met with him 15 times. And he would call me. I mean, like, just a very different dynamic. But America First sat around and had those conversations with people in a whole host of areas during that 4-year period. And when these guys started Trump 2.0, they had all of the benefit of the research, the policies. And think about who makes up America First. Linda McMahon, Larry Kudlow, Chad Wolf, all of these policy people, Keith Kellogg, who had served in the first administration and said, okay, if we're going to keep the America First agenda moving forward, why not look to the people who were there in the first term that were implementing it? I mean, there's a lot of great think tanks in Washington, D.C., but they're filled with people who just think. These were people who were doers. They were like, we got this done. We know exactly where the roadblocks are. We know exactly how to do it. So to me, the reason that I felt passionate about writing this book is because too many people were dismissive. Oh, it's Trump's second term. It didn't just happen. And that's what people have to understand, is that institutions like this made a huge difference. It was like spring training for the next term. And that's what I think is important. I feel like so many of this stuff gets washed away because the media will just sort of be like, well, Trump's second term is continuing. No one gets it. No one understands what really happened in those 4 years.
Awesome. I want to ask you to go a little bit further on 2.0, but I'll reference 1.0. I made the mistake, Debbie, not long ago, of talking about arguably the 3 or 4 happiest moments of my life. Of course, my wife was there. Of course, the birth of our 4 kids, when the Philadelphia Eagles finally won the Super Bowl. And the third, what a mistake, you talk about foot and mouth, was when Trump beat Hillary, to everyone's shock, right?
No, to her shock.
And my
Your
wife
wife was like...
My wife said, well, What about our wedding? Oh my gosh, clean up on aisle 9. But that was an amazing night. But then we saw all the traps that were being laid for you and the incoming administration. And one of the things I love, I already mentioned I'm a Philly guy, but I love Rocky Balboa. And he has a great quote, which is, it ain't about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit, how much you can take, and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now, you referenced, and I'm going to ask you to go further on Trump 2.0. One of the things I love about AFPI, man, the charter meeting was scheduled for the morning of January 7th, 2021. It was a pretty dark time. And it was thought by the ecosystem that you and I have worked in for a couple decades here that this America First thing, it's a bunch of peasants, we're going to send them back to the hills. It's over. And what I love about what Linda and Brooke and Larry did is they doubled down when it was darkest. Now, for that adjoining 4 years, which is very painful, and maybe this side of heaven, you don't know how it all works, but the good Lord in his way used that 4 years, which was a very dark time, to bring back a governing agenda that was on steroids, that could move so fast. We're privileged to count from this organization alone, over 90 individuals have been deployed into the administration, including 7 at the cabinet level. So can you go a little bit deeper on the velocity of being able to make impact this time around under President Trump? Because guess what? Without him, this movement would have went back to the hills.
Yeah. So it's important to understand that, as I said, I just gave you a glimpse of the people that came into the administration in Trump 1.0. There were a lot of recommendations. People would be like, hey, you know who'd be good for this position and that position? And there was a general acceptance that, oh, well, that's got to be because you get it. You want to work for President Trump. In many cases, people came into the administration because they wanted to work for themselves. They were like, great, I want to implement the agenda that I think is needed in X area or Y area. Or in some cases, they wanted to come in to stop the agenda. And there was a dude who literally wrote an op-ed in the New York Times called under the name Anonymous to talk about how he sits in high-level meetings and figures out how to slow the agenda down. Think about the contrast of the people that came in this time. This wasn't recommendations. In fact, I will go out on a limb and say that if you doodled negatively about President Trump in the 6th grade, you're probably not getting past vetting this time. They're much more hardcore in looking at people's social media. In the first term, it was, oh, don't worry, we have to accept that person. They're the expert in that area. They're fine. Not so much now. The difference, though, in this administration is we picked people based on recommendations. Oh, this person's good on this. They're not people who are committed to the agenda, right? In other words, there was this sense that they're good in that area, not that they're there to execute on the promises that President Trump made. And that's a big difference. This administration, I would argue, if you look at the people, like I tell people all the time, I love cabinet meetings. They're one of my favorite things because you're held accountable. In the Biden administration, like literally, I don't know that you could name a single Biden cabinet official. They just didn't do anything. They were held back from meeting with the guy for obvious reasons. They didn't really get much done. In this administration, President Trump holds you accountable. Every 30 days or so, there's a televised cabinet meeting. And he's like, all right, Linda McMahon, what have you done to disassemble the Department of Education? And she has to sit there. She doesn't get to go, oh, let's have Marco go. Like she actually, right? And then he's like, Brooke, what's the USDA up to? Like, Lee Zeldin, you're up. Like, you don't get to hide under the table. Everybody's held accountable about what they've done to advance the agenda. And I think that's vastly different than what's happened in Trump 1.0. There was no accountability for moving the president's agenda. It was, in many cases, about their own personal agenda. But I got to tell you one personal story that I think is interesting, because when you talk about people, it's not just the people that got in, it's the people that didn't get in. Because a lot of people, as I said, got in the first time. So let me tell you a little funny story. I'm leaving the White House, and the president says, is there anything you want to do to, and I said, yeah, I'd love to serve on the board of the Naval Academy. And he says, okay, great. There's a couple slots that are still filled by Obama people. And when they cycle off, when their term ends, we'll slot you in In the interim, he named me as a commissioner of the White House Commission on White House Fellows. Okay, so like a year later, I get a phone call. Hey, one of the Obama people their term is up. We're nominating you. So I get sworn in as a member of the Board of Visitors, U.S. Naval Academy. I think it's September 8th, 2020. Biden comes into office. I get a note from the head of personnel of the Biden administration. It says, "Dear Mr. Spicer, thanks for your service, blah, blah, blah. By 5 o'clock tonight, submit your resume or you're fired." So I just wrote back, no. Like, literally, no. I'm Irish. I probably should have thought it through, but that's. So they fired me. Remember, September, and here's the kicker. My term ended in November. So 6 weeks later, they could have nominated somebody new, and life would have gone on. Anyway, and by the way, they fired everyone. West Point Air Force. And one of the people, by the way, was H.R. McMaster. Now, this was on Monday or Tuesday, and on Wednesday, McMaster, Lieutenant General, graduate of West Point, professor at West Point, was receiving the Distinguished Alumni Award at West Point. So whoever had to do his intro had to change it he currently serves on the board of West Point to, he was fired last night by the President of the United States, which I did think there's something completely backwards about that. So anyway, I get a phone call a couple weeks later from Gene Hamilton. He's one of the lawyers served in this Trump 2.0 at America First Legal. And he says, hey, we're asking everyone who got fired if they'd be interested in being a plaintiff in a lawsuit. I said, okay. Now, Martin, I've never gone to law school. I watch a lot of Law and Order. But the next line was what grabbed me. He goes, here's the deal. We want to lose the case. I'm like, Gene, I'm not really sure if you understand how the law works, but you're supposed to win the cases. And he's like, no, we're going to lose. And I was like, okay, keep going. He's like, we want the Biden administration to go to court and argue that they have the legal authority to fire anyone. And I was like, okay. He's like, because when Trump or whomever get back in office, we want this. So we lost. Then we went to the appeals court, and we lost again at the appeals court. You know, and the Biden administration's like, we won. I'm like, did you? Then guess who did win? Donald Trump. So I start reminding everyone, as if they didn't know, I was like, Spicer v. Biden, because that was the case. The only two people who agreed to be plaintiffs, by the way, were myself and Russ Vought. The only two people. You talk about dark times. Everyone's like, we're just going to let it go. We're going to let it go. And I said, put my name on it. So Spicer v. Biden goes down in history. President Trump wins. Then I get a call, and I think, again, it's all in the dates are in the book, but I think it's March or April. I get a call, and they say, from the Washington Post, and they said, hey, we wanted to know if you have a comment on the Kennedy Center board of directors getting fired. Now, I was like, listen, I know I was on Dancing with the Stars, but not really. I don't go to like a ton of
How did I forget that in your introduction?
So I said, yeah, I don't know really why you're asking me. Like, I don't really, no offense, like, that's really not my thing. And he's like, oh, so you haven't heard or whatever. And I'm like, heard what? And he goes, well, they put out a statement. They said, due to the precedent set in Spicer v. Biden, we have no recourse. Now, think about that. That would have never happened had he been sequential. When President Trump fires everybody and all these liberals whine, I go, oh, I'm sorry, thank Joe Biden. The case is Spicer v. Biden, not Spicer v. Trump. It was Joe Biden who did this. And it was another one of those things that came up out of the darkness of that 4 years that is now benefiting Donald Trump. But this gets back to this notion that whether it was AFPI or America First Legal, we couldn't be doing some of the things that we could without those 4 years. And I know sometimes it's hard for the people, but we wouldn't be sitting here today. We wouldn't have the agenda we had today. We wouldn't have the success we have today if the people that brought America First up, that laid the groundwork to give people the roadmaps when they came into Trump 2.0. That's it. There's no question in my mind that this president wouldn't be as successful as he is today without that kind of stuff. But think about the number of people that President Trump has been able to get out of this administration that were holdovers that didn't come back because of that legal authority. And that happened because Stephen Miller and Gene Hamilton and a bunch of other people said, why do we not put together an organization called America First Legal? And it was a great partner to this movement. So again, part of this is just, all of it is understanding what's happening. The stuff that Linda's doing, Linda McMahon, by the way, I got to tell you this is my favorite Linda McMahon story because you quoted her. So after Trump, in the first Trump 1.0, they stood America First PAC. I'd been asked a few times to go on Dancing with the Stars, and I kept saying no, no, no. In fact, the president at one point was like, "You're not really thinking of this." But after the third time, I said, "You know what? I'm horrible at dancing. I'll get kicked right off. But how cool would it be to spend a few weeks in LA, seeing what this is like?" So I'm working as a spokesman for America First PAC, and a guy by the name of Brian Walsh was the executive director. And I called Brian and I said, "Hey, Brian, I got some news. I'm going to do this Dance with the Stars thing." He's like, "Okay, that's great." I go, "I'm a little nervous, so I got to call Linda." And he said, "Okay." I go, how do you think she's going to take it? It's a reality show." And he goes, "Dude, she led the WWE. Do you really think she's going to care about a dancing show?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I forgot." So, yeah, she was like, "Oh, that's awesome." And I was like so intimidated to call Linda and tell her this. And then she was like, "This will be great." I'm like, so anyway. But all of this stuff only occurred because of that 4 years.
Amen, brother. We've got just a few minutes left, so I'm going to ask you 2 questions, if I might. One of the things that's been most impressive about President Trump, and I had been involved in local politics in Jersey all the way up to working on a couple presidential elections. I have never, ever seen a politician, which I guess he sort of admits to being one now, but in his heart he's not. I've never seen somebody honor their commitments more of campaigning and then governing, right? Now, I think one of our Republican senators this weekend was reminded of what happens when you don't do that, and we wish Dr. Bill Cassidy well in his next profession, whatever that might be. He is the first Republican senator to lose a primary in over a decade. But I think President Trump is really demonstrating through leadership, you gotta actually deliver, ladies and gentlemen, and give Speaker Johnson a heck of a lot of credit. At any given time, his margin in that House is like 1 to 3 votes. But then you hear some of the others, and we talked about at dinner, it might not be appropriate, but too late. A lot of our people on the Hill, they got more excuses than a pregnant nun about why they can't do their job. And so talk to us about this remarkable businessman and now politician who actually delivers.
Yeah, you and I both have been in the game a while. Normally, around election season, there's an excuse. Look, I need 2 more years because the Senate, this, my committee didn't do this, but I need to keep fighting. President Trump is essentially the political equivalent of the dog that caught the car. You think about this. For 4 years, we heard about open borders. He comes in, he says, "Homan, go get it done." It's like January 30th. He's like, "Done."
Done.
Done. How many months in a row did we go without an illegal border crossing? I mean, it was like we've now just chalked it up as a win. Do you realize I posted this on social media the other day just because I wanted to make sure I never forgot. There's a chart that Axios put out the other day. Every major city, crime is down between 50 and 75%.
It's unbelievable.
And it didn't just happen. It's not like they all chalk it up like crime's down. It didn't just happen. Like it didn't rain. Like they're like, "Oh, it's raining." No, crime didn't just go down. Policies changed. Illegal immigration stopped. We deployed the National Guard. These things can happen, and people just forget that it was a new president that came in and did it. You think about NATO. For decades, we have been promised the deal with NATO was everybody puts 2% in their own national defense, and you get Article 5 protections. And the rest of the world said, "Why don't we just let the U.S. pick up the tab?" And we agree, and politicians of both sides said, "Okay, no problem." Trump said, "Nope, that's not the deal." And suddenly they paid up. Trade, same thing. We give market and non-tariff bearer access to our country, and then they all had a bunch of excuses. And he was like, "No, that's a raw deal for our farmers, our ranchers, our service provider, our manufacturers." And slowly but surely, country by country, we're getting better deals. Tax-wise, I mean, it's just over and over again. Think about what Linda's doing in education. We've talked about, go back and read the stuff from Reagan. We need a smaller federal government. We need to shift education back to the states. It's a talking point that every Republican has said since Reagan in the 1980s. And yet Donald Trump said, hey, Linda, go put yourself out of a job. And slowly but surely, she's sending the Department of Education responsibilities back to the states, moving along. It just took leadership. But Donald Trump's the first politician that comes along that can say, I basically did every single thing. What he gets criticized for, by the way, is doing it.
Right.
They're like, I can't believe he's holding NATO responsible because he promised he would do it. He moved, the first term, he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Now, remember, every president, both parties had said that they would do it. The criticism of him was, wow, no one's actually done it. They just say they'll do it. And on issue after issue after issue. And what I love in particular about Trump 2.0 is he's actually taking on culture. He's saying whether it's education or culture, he understands that that's a key part of our society. And so you're going to attack it. You're going to end the DEI, the wokeness. I just think that that's the legacy that he's created. That's why in the subtitle of the book, I talked about how this is really going to permanently change the country.
Well, and I think that'll be our last question. And ladies and gentlemen, we will ask everyone to come up and get your book signed by Sean. I should let everybody know, too, if you want to bring Sean and his traveling show to any part of the country, please see him or Katie after, because this is a great message and a great story. But I think it's appropriate that we end on that final question, Sean, which is what is the future of America First and these policies? You know, when AFPI was stood up in sort of the darkness of early 2021, a lot of people, the media, some on the left, some even on the right, said, well, it's just a holdover to go from a perspective Trump 45 to Trump 47. We've never directly tried to rebut that verbally, because the only way you overcome that is through action. I think we're demonstrating that. For us, America First didn't start with the golden escalator in June of 2015, even though it was captivated as never before. The sentiments of America First, and that's why I wear this Gadsden flag most days, is found in the colonists before July 4, 1776, saying this King George is a rotten SOB. He's not going to direct our lives from far. It's a rejection of political elites. It's a rejection of political correctness. It is an embrace of a bottom-up society where the bigs are not dictating to the regular people how to live. And so I want you to close, maybe we have forecasting, Sean, the next wave of policy ideas that are really going to captivate our fellow citizens and make clear that America First as a thing, with President Trump as a person who galvanized it more than ever, but we saw that same sentiment rise with the Tea Party, and thank God for the Tea Party, which showed the door to a bunch of squishy Republicans, which more to go. Thank God for Ross Perot and the messages he was sounding out in 1992 and 1996, which are part and parcel of this. But a great man who was a founding chair of our organization here was laid to rest about 7 weeks ago at Notre Dame, and that's Coach Lou Holtz. I remember when I met with Brooke and Linda 5 years ago this week, I was at another conservative institute, and things were fine, right? It was a return to normal. We've won before, we've lost before, we know what to do. And I think for some of us, we knew there had to be something different. And Brooke and Linda outlined to me in that interview that they were preparing a novel lawsuit against big tech to sue on behalf of President Trump and other Americans. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. 5 years ago today, Bruce, if you went on Twitter or Facebook and you wanted to post something about Hunter Biden's laptop or the origins of the China virus, it was automatically censored. Censorship had come to America, and free speech was in full decline. And so I heard about that, which I'm Irish too, so we like a good fight. And then I heard you're going to have a chance to work with Coach Lou Holtz, Irish again, had me on that. And I'm married to a Latin woman, so I don't even stop at the convenience store on the way home without pre-authorization. But that vision laid out in what was supposed to be a 30-minute meeting ended up being 2 hours, was so palpable. I went down to the parking garage in Crystal City, and I said, Joanna, I don't know how to tell you this, but we're leaving, and we're joining this organization. She said, okay. One of his last public speeches, Coach Holtz, he said, I've been blessed. Think about this guy, right? Scrawny, soaking wet, probably never more than 150 pounds. He had a lisp his whole life. And I can tell you this, when I went to that funeral, there were guys with shoulders twice as wide as mine, laughing, hugging, crying, telling stories about what leadership can do in the transformation of individuals, of teams, of communities, of states, of nations. And one of his last public speeches, which is what I want you to comment on for us as an America First movement, that it's made a lot of headway with a lot more to go. And you think of a lot more to go, what does that mean? The average first-time home buyer in America is age 40. If we don't solve for that and do it quick, the Mom Donnies of the world are the future attractions all over this country, and Charlie Kirk warned us about that before he was taken from us. But Coach Holt said one of his biggest regrets was 1988, they finally win that national championship. And he said, the message I had from my staff and players was, we're going to maintain. There's no such thing. In this realm, in this life, individually, in your marriages, in your relationships, and teams, and organizations, countries, you're either growing or you're dying. So give us a little picture about what growing for us through policy, as Linda says, you get the policies right, then your politics follow. Talk about the next wave of ideas that's going to allow us not only this November, but in November 2028 and November 2032 and November 2050 to keep that support of our fellow citizens going forward through policy.
Yeah, first, I would say the institution is critical. In other words, there's a lot of good, smart people out there that have written ideas. What America First Policy Institute has done is created that vehicle that they can move. And so part of it is investing in this institution and making sure that we have a way to bring them to fruition. Because if you're just a good person out there writing papers and throwing them into the wind, maybe they get traction, but more likely than not, they don't. And what America First has done is created this pipeline of people and process and policy that we can kind of then push out into reality. So one is, I think, to make sure that we maintain the institutions. Too often, you go for election cycle to election cycle. And so what is that vision that keeps America first with the infrastructure that allows that to happen? Right? I think that would be the one caveat that I would add on this, that the great policies can happen, a lot of great thinkers on there, but they need a home. They need a place to go that actually is actionable. There's a lot of think tanks out there. There's very few that have had the impact that AFPI has had. I mean, think about it. You mentioned 9 members of the cabinet, 90-plus people at senior level. I mean, this is basically the government. And so I think making sure that we maintain what AFPI is structurally is critical, so that that tool stays there, that vehicle stays there. Number 2, I think we've got big ideas. You mentioned housing, debt, China, AI, healthcare. Those are all big, big issues that have to get tackled. When we talked about, where the future is going. And so starting to think, I wrote a whole chapter in there about DOGE. And I think when you look at why DOGE was, I think successful, net, it was a successful effort. But you go back and you look at reinventing government under Gore and the Grace Commission under Reagan. Like, we need to start, JD's leading this great effort on fraud, but we need to be cognizant of how we're creating greater efficiencies in government and bringing in new technologies, but getting rid of the old stuff that is just, the idea, Elon brought this to light, right? The idea that there's a limestone mine in Pennsylvania and only X number of federal employees can retire on any given day because the pulley system only allows that many pieces of paperwork to go into the limestone mine is a bit antiquated. Yeah. And yet it wouldn't have come to light if it wasn't for Elon and DOGE. And so I think, how do we keep these efforts going and highlighting them and making sure the American people know that we are the movement with the ideas and the solutions? Because it's about the policy, it's about the infrastructure, but it's also about making sure the American people know that you have it and you're ready to go. So I think that what's going on here, how do we build on it? How do we maintain it? How do we improve upon what AFPI has done is critical to the future.
Amen, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, Sean Spicers.
Great job. Hey, thanks, man.